right, I'm going to give it about 1 more minute just because I'm neurotic.
Hey, Ron, how are you?
Hey, Ozzy. How you doing, bud?
Very good, very good.
Good.
I had my first shot already.
Well, good.
Of tequila?
Oh, yes.
Before lunch.
Well, before lunch here.
4 o'clock soon.
No
The
vodka.
COVID vaccination.
No, the vodka.
I know, Oz.
How you feeling, Ozzy? Okay?
Oh, yeah. I didn't even feel it.
Good.
That was good.
So, Aussie, don't react to it, though. Don't react to it. Don't have any reactions to it. Just feel it, not react.
I'm way too healthy for that.
Good.
At least physically.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
How did you sneak in since you're not 65?
Oh, that's true. You know.
Welcome.
I had my old driver license. That said, I'm over 21.
Nice. All right.
He serenaded them.
Real quick, who's 858-322-175? We just need to know so that we can get you logged in as attending.
Well, actually, it's not me, so by deduction.
Yes, thank you. Brilliant. All right, well, we'll figure out who that is as we're working our way through. There we go. All right, so all that being said, it's now time to start the meeting as we get our last few people to join us. It is February 9th, 2021, and let's start the meeting with ringing the bell.
Is that your wife calling you?
Yes, in fact, it is. All right, let's see. Oh, come on. There we go. Our invocation from Dr. Joe.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I thought since Valentine's Day is right around the corner, that I would share as our invocation one of the most famous passages in the Bible about love. So let us pray this thought of love. Love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful. It is not arrogant or rude. Love does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentment. It does not rejoice at wrong, but rejoices in right. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much. All right.
I've been married 4 times.
Nice.
That was great. Right at that moment. That was great.
You have lots of love to give, don't you, Ossie? Very loving.
That's a nice way of putting it. Let's
Love
see.
never dies.
Yes, only spouses.
Here I am. Where am I?
Oh, folks, I forgot to get someone to do this. So will you join me to pledge allegiance?
Sure.
I pledge allegiance
to the
flag
flag
of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Instead of a patriotic song, we actually have a patriotic video this time, provided by one of our members, and I wanted to share this instead of a song, so please enjoy this.
Oh, shite. Thank you very much, Keith, for sharing that with me.
Tears.
Yes. So welcome to Escondido Rotary Club, our Zoom meeting for the 9th of February. We do have a couple of guests here. We have I've got to scroll through this list. I apologize. Our visiting Rotarians, Frank and Gloria Tecca. Welcome. We have Keith's, is it brother or
that would be my brother from Iowa.
Brother from Iowa.
Yes.
Very nice.
Thank you.
And
we have our program for the day. We have Navinder Sawhney, and we have Rod Serry. This keeps rolling through. I saw another new name here just a moment ago. Oh yeah, so Wayne Rickenbach, but that's not the new name that I saw. There's someone else that came in.
That was an Olson.
Olson. Yes.
Ryan Olson.
Hi.
Hello, Mr. Olson. How are you? Who are you? How do we know you?
Thanks for having me. Bill Smith invited me. I'm the new chief executive for the Palomar Health Medical Foundation, and it's an honor to be with you.
Excellent. Well, we're so glad to have you here as well.
Thank you. So good to be here.
I hope you enjoy our show. There are no big names such as, Prince isn't going to be here, but it's still kind of fun. So to our guests and speakers and visiting Rotarians, here's...
Hey, I have a guest.
Oh, you do?
Andrew, I have a guest.
Please.
I have Elias Velasquez, just recently graduated from college. He's in studying government, and he's my new intern here. Local boy, grew up here in Escondido, and actually competed in the Rotary Speech Contest. Didn't win though. But he's here studying government, and I just want you guys all to kind of see him, even though it's a little bit in the background.
Elias, welcome, and I'm glad you're getting the how not to do government first, and then you can go.
Mute everybody, please.
Thank you.
All right, so here's our welcome song. Thank you all for joining us.
Don't sing along.
Oh, why'd you turn yourself back on?
Howdy, we're glad to have you here. Welcome, we sing it loud and clear. Relax, enjoy the program, and won't you come back to see us again?
Ozzy is very protective of his song, and we haven't gotten Dick Daniels to do his version yet, so... Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you're here. So next week, we have Myrna North talking about George Washington and the Revolutionary War. We have Haven House on the 17th, the 3rd, and the 17th of March. It was kind of mentioned, some of our potential new members really want to kind of meet people. Kelly, do you think we could have some prospective members join you for Haven House if we can convince them to do that?
Yes, absolutely. I would love that.
There we go. So Kelly is 858-832-22175. Nice.
For some reason, it has me twice. I don't know why.
It's all good. We like that. Thank you. On the 23rd, we have Krishna Kabra talking about Children's Discovery Museum. And then Paul Hagee will be here on the 2nd on healthcare trends for 2021. Mike Strong on the 9th about East Valley Specific Plan. Dr. Sabina Pasha will be here on the 16th for functional medicine specialty. The 23rd, our favorite Robin Douglas will be joining us on to talk about art. We don't know exactly what yet. On the 30th, Dr. Lawyer Steve Weitzen is our district governor, and he'll be doing our program. And on the 6th of April, Blake Stanicky, who is a blind hockey player, will be our program. Member moments. Do we have any member moments that I'm unaware of at this point? I have one, no, I have two that I am aware of, but do we have any that I'm not aware of? All right, hearing none. First off, Danny Sherlock went to another Rotary Club. Can you believe this? He went to some other Rotary Club for money. And I mean, that hurts. That hurts. So I hope, what does that say, $2,500? Danny, it's been suggested that there should be a fine for this. What do you think?
Yes.
$75 fine for being in the newspaper and not telling us about another Rotary Club sending them money. I think that's appreciable.
Yeah, 75 bucks.
Exactly.
There we go. I think we should fine him for being in the newspaper, but I think we should waive his fine that he got another Rotary Club to pay for his events.
Yes, but he didn't tell us. He didn't even let us know beforehand. We had to find out about it from the newspaper. We'll discuss it.
I've actually been the program at two other Rotary clubs too.
Well, speaking of that,
but our club hasn't invited me to do a program.
Okay, well, unfortunately, we're booked all the way through 2021. But I will let Dara know that the first program we should have in July should be Danny Sherlock from Boys and Girls Clubs. I think that's brilliant, honestly. And we have another member who's doing a program is it Thursday, Jan, in San Marcos?
I already did it this past Thursday.
Last Thursday. Yes. Let's see, another member moment. This is our guest, Keith's brother gets to be a grandpa. Do you want to talk about this a little bit, Wayne?
This was entirely unexpected, and I greatly appreciate it, Keith. Well played. Our son and daughter-in-law, and they had a baby on Saturday. Her name is Violet Irene, and they're doing great.
Outstanding. We can't fine you $75 for this, and it wasn't in the newspaper. But we'll find a way,
for you, bro.
We'll find a way. We'll find a way.
Oh, thank you for showing that. That's great.
Oh, it is wonderful, and it's so good to see a new face in the world. In the wild, Christine.
Am I on mute?
No,
Or I'm fine.
You're fine.
Good, perfect. Yeah, for our visiting Rotarians and guests, we do a little segment each week called Rotarians in the Wild. And it's especially fun when we can see that our friends and club members are out having some fun. So here is Justin and Alex at Mount Laguna. Evidently, Justin likes to go through snow with just tennis shoes. So all we can say about that. Beautiful photos though, you guys.
One question though, are you wearing a button-down shirt, Justin?
That's what I hike in all the time.
Okay, good, good.
Oh, I was hoping Dick Daniels would be here today. I don't know how many others of you saw this, but evidently there's such a thing as a high line from one ship to another, and that's Dick Daniels.
What?
So, yeah.
Right here.
He highlined from the USS Fire Drake, which was an ammunition ship, across a pretty noisy and wet trip to the permanent duty station on the USS Lexington CVA-16. So that, speaking of our member programs, that could be a pretty interesting thing. I'd never heard of anything like that, and that's certainly Rotarian in the Wild.
He probably kept himself calm by singing.
Oh, I bet that's true. Our own Jackie Skay has her original oil painting plus some cliches on exhibit at the Artist Gallery on Grand Avenue. It says you're safe to visit, so we should go help to support and take a look at Jackie's artwork.
Beautiful artwork.
Very lovely, yeah. And Rachel Currington, she said, today was a day for giving back. She was volunteering with the Escondido Community Foundation, handing out wine and charcuterie boards. Well, I just never heard of a community service project that handed out wine and charcuterie boards, but I'm all in. So thank her.
And the fact that you can pronounce charcuterie, see, I can't even pronounce it.
And one more. Yes, our speaker last week, Paulette, took a great selfie with her desert family out at Johnson's Landing. And then she found somebody at Anza Borrego Desert State Park that does not look like merganser or snowy white egret or burrowing owl. So yeah, that's quite the photographer when you can catch a dinosaur.
Right. Excellent. Thank you so much, Christine. And actually, since you're on, you're on.
Oh, I'm on. Okay. You may remember, ladies and gentlemen, the program in November on the Rotary Foundation talked about our district having different rules for giving in order to get the money that comes in from grants. And so in our case, to get a district grant next year, we need to have donated to the annual fund of the Rotary Foundation, $50 per member, which would mean $5,500. To get a global grant, and we usually apply for several in a year, we need to come up with $100 per member at 110 members that we have now for $11,000. With money coming in this week from Paulette's artwork, and I thank her and Andrew very much for that good idea that some money's coming in. We have $460 from last week and another $500 check I'm expecting. So we're at $7,475. $7,475. So yeah, we need our members to take a look at what they can afford to do. And I'm kind of making a soft ask for you to give to the Rotary Foundation if you have not. The easiest way is Rotary Direct. You can sign up at rotary.org and just say, I can do $25 a month. Either put it on this credit card or take it out of that savings account. We do have generous members in our club that do $1,000 a year. But we've got a little ways to go here to make $11,000. So yeah, if you're thinking of it at all, it's a new tax year. Give me a call and I will match your donations with points where I can. So if you gave $250, I can match that with 250 club points. And in your account, it would show as a $500 donation to the Rotary Foundation towards your Paul Harris Fellow. So give me a call or a text or an email if you have any questions. But yeah, we need to do some fundraising before the end of Andrew's year.
And I will say on this, I'm going to throw in a little bit harder pitch on this. I know we're asking a lot of the club this year, especially financially, and there's going to be another hard one coming up soon because we don't have our normal fundraisers going on this year. But here's my little bit harder pitch on this. If we had been attending meetings in person, a good number of you would have been buying a $20 lunch every week. I think, at least for me, I can come up with $100 from the lunches I didn't buy at the Center for the Arts. If you look at it that way, maybe we're not asking for a lot of money that you would have been spending anyhow for lunches. So just a thought, just a thought.
And Andrew, thanks for that. That's a great idea. Yeah, it's a good way to look at it. So you can send me a check, call me with info, or go on rotary.org and I'll get the information that you've donated. So thank you, everybody.
And thank you very much. All right, guess what? It is time for our fun song. This is just for, again, our guests and guest speakers. This is how we welcome our program for the week. We have the inestimable or indefatigable or just, he's a great guy. I love this guy. This week, singing to the song, to the tune of Skip to My Lou, we have Jay, I'm a Dr. Two Grossman.
That's not true. First of all, it's the Home on the Range.
Oh, dang.
Oh. But other than that, you're right on. Okay, so have you muted everybody?
I will. Hang on one sec.
You give him too much credit.
There we go. Go ahead, Jay, unmute yourself.
All right, I think we're good. Okay, here we go. If you find out your heart skips a beat or won't start, then it's time to see these two docs. They can slow your fast pace or even replace the parts that don't come in a box. Thanks to Navinder and Rod, they help fix our hearts, thank God. Without any stitches, and they hope no hitches, they're able to repair our bod.
Nice. Well, that's right. We have the ability to clap at the bottom of the page here. That's, as someone pointed out. Let's see, reactions, clapping. Whoop. There we go. All right. So, Dr. Geez, I'm sorry. I was multitasking there. Where's Dr. Moyer? He's going to introduce our
He's right here, Andy.
There he is.
First, Andrew. Andrew.
Yes.
Yes. I'm sorry, real quick, Jay. Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to thank Christine and Vaughn for volunteering for 3 of the speakers for writing songs. And there's still a bunch that still need to be written, songsters. So pick them out and let everybody know. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Dr. Moyer.
Thank you, President Andy, fellow Rotarians. It gives me great pleasure to introduce two of the preeminent specialty cardiologists in San Diego County. You, in the viewpoint that you got this week, cited their educational experiences. They're both products of outstanding medical schools and training programs. Rod Serry specializes in implanting heart valves through the artery. So if you need a new one, rather than having to open your chest to put a new valve in, Rod's specialty is actually going through the circulatory system. Rod also specializes in artery grafts from the inside, rather than having to open your abdomen or open your arm or your leg to repair a diseased artery. And Rod is an expert in both these areas. Navinder Sawhney is what we call an electrophysiologist who specializes in pacemakers and putting catheters in the heart to localize the source of erratic, potentially life-threatening heart rhythms, and to use either heat, cold, laser, electricity, other techniques to essentially knock that tissue out. And I know that at least a couple of our club members have certainly benefited from both their care. So thank you. And I believe Dr. Serry is going to lead off.
Thank you, Dr. Moyer. As just a technicality, because Dr. Sawhney, I've always felt is more sophisticated than me, better looking than me. He's the electrician of the heart. They need to go through more hurdles to learn what they know. I'm going to have Dr. Sawhney start off, and then myself, that I'm more of a plumber, I'll just follow him.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, Rod. I don't think any of that is true, but I'm happy to lead off our discussion this afternoon. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. My name is Nav Sawhney. I'm a heart rhythm specialist, as Dr. Moyer mentioned, and I wanted to talk a little bit about atrial fibrillation and really focus on one of the worst aspects of AFib, which is stroke, and show certain ways we can help control that arrhythmia and prevent stroke. So let me try to share my screen here, and hopefully I can figure this out. Can you all see my screen at all?
Yes.
And Doug, does it say stroke reduction? Is that what you see?
It does.
Okay, terrific, thank you. So, we're gonna talk about-
real quick, if you go up to the top,
mm-hmm.
Go to the left a little bit now, that it looks like a screen with a, move your cursor to the left.
Off here?
See where the go, that one, press that button.
This one right here?
Yep.
Is that better?
Yes, there you go.
Terrific. So good. So I'm going to focus in on the most common heart rhythm problem that I deal with, which is known as atrial fibrillation. I'll explain exactly what that is in a moment, but it's the most common heart rhythm problem we have. It affects 1% of the entire population of the United States, and that's all comers from babies to adults, but it really gets more prevalent, more common as we get older. And so in the US today, there's roughly 5 to 6 million people who are diagnosed with atrial fibrillation. But as you can see from that graph there, that number is increasing exponentially because our population's aging, and the other comorbidities that go along with atrial fibrillation, diabetes, hypertension, obesity, sleep apnea, heart failure, all increase in prevalence. So too does the arrhythmia. Now, in a normal heart, what happens is we have electrical current that starts in the right side of the heart. It's a series of cells called the sinus node that basically tell your heart when to beat. And those electrical signals then let your heart muscle coordinate the blood flow and pump it out to the rest of your body. And so normally you want the top chambers of the heart to pump, fill blood into the bottom, and then let the bottom do the work and send it out to your brain and your muscles and everywhere else. And it does so in a very smooth and coordinated fashion. But when you go into AFib, what happens is that you have other cells on the other side of the heart that start to take over. And they march to their own drum. They don't listen to the sinus node, and they can make the heart beat very chaotically. And so what happens in that scenario is people's hearts will beat irregularly, sometimes very, very fast, occasionally sort of slow. And when it's beating irregularly, it's not pumping the blood in an efficient fashion, and it tends to stagnate. And that can do a lot of things. It can certainly cause symptoms. People will get tired, fatigued, have less energy because the blood's not circulating as well. They're not thinking as clearly. It's actually associated with dementia. But the other thing that happens when the blood doesn't circulate is it forms clots. And so what this image is here is an ultrasound image of the heart, and the heart is in atrial fibrillation. And can you see my my mouse cursor? Does that show up on the screen too? No. Okay, if I'm pointing at things, you just see the screen, but not the cursor, no problem. So, but what this image is of the heart, and there's a, if you can't see my cursor, there's a sort of a brighter area and a little comet looking thing, and that brighter area is a blood clot inside the heart. And so when people are in AFib and the blood doesn't circulate, they're prone to forming blood clots. And if the blood clot forms in the heart, if it stays there, it's okay. But the problem is one of these days it's going to work its way out. And when it works its way out and it gets into your blood vessels, it can go anywhere. Most commonly, it'll go to the brain and it'll block the blood flow up in the brain. And that's what causes a stroke. And so AFib is the most common reason that people have strokes, particularly people over the age of 70. And so when people have atrial fibrillation, their risk of stroke is 5 times higher than somebody who doesn't have stroke. And it really is one of the most devastating outcomes of having this illness. And so when I first get a patient referred to me who has AFib, several things go through my head. One is, as I mentioned, their heart can beat erratically and sometimes very fast. Their hearts can go 150, 140 beats a minute, where a normal heart is, say, 60 to 100. And so when your heart is racing all the time, it can wear the heart out. The muscle becomes weak. It leads to what we call congestive heart failure. So we can prevent that by getting the heart rate slowed down. And so there's various medications we use to slow it down. Sometimes it can get too slow. And if it gets too slow, then that's usually when people end up with pacemakers, which don't stop the heart from racing, but they certainly can kick in if the heart goes the other way and gets too slow, and are very helpful in certain situations with AFib, but certainly don't cure the process. And a lot of patients, when they go into the arrhythmia and the heart's beating erratically and the blood's not moving efficiently, they just don't feel as well. They feel more tired, they feel dizzy, they feel out of breath. So getting people back into normal heart rhythm can be a very important goal for a lot of patients. Sometimes we do that with certain, what I call antiarrhythmic medications. Sometimes we do that with something called a cardioversion, which is a procedure where we use an electrical shock on the outside of the body to reset the heart. And sometimes we do what I do, which is called a catheter ablation, where, as Dr. Moyer mentioned, we use various energy sources like electrical radiofrequency current to basically eliminate the cells that are triggering the arrhythmia in the first place and let the heart take back over into a normal rhythm. And in all patients, what I'm going to focus on mainly is stroke prevention and ways we can do that, because I really think those are the most devastating outcomes. This is a busy slide. This is just taken from the medical guidelines, and it's just for me to tell you that catheter ablation, based on medical studies of getting the people back into normal rhythm, is what we call a class 1 recommendation. It's actually the recommended therapy for people who have symptoms related to the disease. And it's helpful because it improves quality of life. It improves mood. People get anxious in the arrhythmia. They're physically more able to do things, which also helps their mental components. It probably reduces stroke risk. And in certain populations of people, particularly populations of people who are developing congestive heart failure from their arrhythmia, it's been shown to reduce mortality. So there's a lot of benefits of why we like to get people in rhythm and why I do catheter ablation. And this is just an example from our lab at Palomar Hospital of an ablation procedure. It's minimally invasive. We just have a little IV into the vein in your leg. And we can get up into the heart, and the screen at the top there is showing you electrical signals that are beating abnormally. And I can look at those signals and then use electrical energy to eliminate them to try to get the heart back into normal. This is a map that we create when we're working. And what this map shows you is purple tissue is normal and the other colors are not. And so as the heart starts to develop these abnormal cells, we can see those and target those in a very minimally invasive fashion. And the main reason to do this is everything I just mentioned. People tend to feel better. They have a little bit more energy level. It can improve heart function. But what it can't do completely is get rid of the stroke risk. And so one of the other aspects of the medical guidelines here, and I just put this up to remind me to tell you, is that some people want to have an ablation because they don't want to take blood thinning medications anymore, which is mainly how we reduce stroke. And that's not recommended. It's actually down at the bottom of my screen here where it says class 3 harm. That means our medical organizations are saying that's not really a good reason to do an ablation because it doesn't, unfortunately, completely eliminate stroke risk. And so when someone is first diagnosed with an arrhythmia, such as atrial fibrillation, one of the things we do is figure out right off the bat, how likely is this going to lead to a stroke? Because that can be a really devastating outcome. And we use something that we call a CHADS2 VAS score, but basically what it means is we look at various risk profiles of certain things, such as how old you are, if you have other vascular disease, decide how likely that event is to happen, and then based on that, try to come up with the most appropriate therapy. And for the most part, when people have an abnormal heart rhythm like atrial fibrillation, the way we reduce stroke is with blood thinners, the most common one being Coumadin or warfarin. But there's a whole host of newer ones, such as the Bigagatran, Rivaroxaban, Apixaban, Edoxaban. The most common ones that you might know or see TV commercials for are Xarelto and Eliquis. And they've been really good medications to help reduce stroke and really have been game-changing for a lot of people. But the reality is, if you look at the data in the United States, and this is from the Pinnacle Registry, a large international registry in the US, when people have AFib, when we know they have stroke risk, when we know they really should be on a blood thinner, the reality is only 60% of people in the United States today are actually on one when they should be. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think people don't like to take medications. I think there's challenges with blood thinners in terms of cost, which is an issue for a lot of people, but also very importantly, bleeding. Blood thinners thin the blood so you don't get blood clots in the heart. That's how they work. That's what they're supposed to do, and they do a good job. But when you thin the blood, there is a downside to that, which is bleeding risk. And that risk is a cumulative risk, meaning every year you're on the blood thinner, the risk gets a little higher. And even in the best medical studies that showed how effective these medications were to prevent stroke, which they're very effective, about a quarter of the patients in the medical studies, and these were selected patients, stopped taking it. And I think that that's true in my practice as well, is that people, even when they get started on the therapy, don't always stick with it due to a variety of reasons. Again, the most common one being bleeding. And so this is just a common example of somebody that I would see in my practice on a very routine basis. A 76-year-old woman who's had a stroke before, and she's been on Eliquis, a blood thinner to help prevent stroke because of her atrial fibrillation, all very appropriate, but then she's having trouble with bleeding, and she's been in the hospital and gotten a blood transfusion, and you get in this situation where we know how to prevent stroke, but the downside to that is bleeding, and when you have both problems, it can be very challenging. And it's actually a fairly common situation that I run into almost on a daily basis. And so scientifically, what we figured out is that when the heart is fibrillating and when the blood isn't moving very well, there tends to be one area in the heart, which is a smaller area, and it's small and the blood doesn't move as well there. And that's where almost all of the blood clots form in the heart, over 90%. That's an area called the left atrial appendage. And so when I showed this ultrasound image before, that area sort of in the middle, slightly right of the screen there is that atrial appendage, and that little bright ball looking thing is that blood clot. And so we figured out, well, if we can just stop the blood from stagnating in that area, maybe we can prevent the clot from forming at all, and then maybe you don't need to be on a blood thinner. And so that's what's called a Watchman procedure. A Watchman procedure is a procedure where we do this, just that. It's again a minimally invasive procedure that takes about an hour, where we put this occluder device into that area called the appendage and prevent those blood clots from forming in all those nooks and crannies behind that white device there that you see on this cartoon. It's been very effective at reducing stroke, particularly in people who can't take blood thinners. And it actually was approved by the FDA now going back to 2015. And so in the 3-4 years I've been doing this, it's become much more common therapy that we can offer to our patients to help prevent their stroke risk. It's covered by CMS and Medicare as long as you meet certain criteria, mainly that you have a stroke risk and you have a reason to seek an alternative option. And I'm going to try to play this video here to just sort of give you an idea of how something like this is done. Doug, can you see this video? Is it playing? Thank you. So, so the Watchman device comes in this plastic catheter, and then it sort of comes all folded up and blows up there sort of like a balloon when you're in the heart. So it can all be done minimally invasively with a really small IV. And so on this cartoon here, what you see is we put an IV in the leg right around the groin area. From the groin, we can string up a wire, and those blood vessels in the leg string up and they get up to the heart. It's also the same way we do a catheter ablation as well. When we get in the heart, we want to focus on this area there called the left atrial appendage, because that's where 90% of the blood clots form in the heart. And we want to make it so that area doesn't form a blood clot to get out to your brain and cause a stroke. And so when we get up into the heart, we were all born with this small opening here. It's called the fossa ovalis. It's a remnant membrane from when we were in utero developing. And it's a very thin area of tissue that allows us to get over to the left side of the heart where we need to work. When we get over to the left side, we then want to direct our sheath, our plastic tube here, into this area of interest called the left atrial appendage. And so we also at the time make some measurements to understand the sort of the shape, because everybody's anatomy in the heart's a little different, and depending on the shape of the appendage, we have to orient the device and our catheter a little differently. But once we understand that orientation, we get our what we call delivery system up into the heart, and it's sort of coded to make measurements to let us know how large of an area we're dealing with, because again, everybody's anatomy is a little different. So once we understand what size of device we need, and there's 5 different sizes to the Watchman, and after we take some time to understand the anatomy, sometimes by injecting in some contrast dyes that we can see under X-ray, which is what that little picture was, then we pick the right device, and then it threads up this plastic tube up into the heart, again, coming up all sort of folded up like an umbrella, and then we just sort of pop it open. And when it pops open, we've already measured the size, so we know that it'll hug onto the heart wall. And then there's these little metal hooks, sort of like fish hooks, to make sure it's locked into place. And once we know it's locked into place, we can just leave that there and pull the IV out. And we check to make sure it's actually blocking the blood supply and nothing's leaking around it. Initially, this device is fabric with some metal tines around it. And so that fabric can form a blood clot. So people do stay on blood thinners after the procedure, but only for about a month and a half. And then your heart cells sort of grow over it, and it sort of disappears and heals over about a month and a half, after which we start stepping down the blood thinners over time. And what this procedure has been shown to do is reduce stroke risk, particularly bleeding strokes, because strokes can be bad outcomes and cause people to, unfortunately, be paralyzed or even pass away. The Watchman device over time, and this is over several years, has shown a reduction in mortality and death. And obviously substantially reduces bleeding, because by getting off the blood thinner over time, you see a very substantial reduction in bleeding over the next, several months of therapy, 72% at 6 months post-procedure. It's a highly successful procedure. The majority of patients, 99%, are off of blood thinners by about a year. And this is just sort of a schematic of how the procedure works. So what happens is people get referred to talk to someone like myself about stroke prevention options. We talk about blood thinners like Coumadin or Xarelto or Eliquis. aspirin, unfortunately, usually isn't a very effective way at preventing stroke with people in AFib. If we decide that the Watchman is the right therapy, then we implant that device. We wait about a month and a half, 45 days to check to make sure the device is sealed off the blood flow and it's done what we needed to do. And at that point, we stop the blood thinner about 45 days after the procedure. We usually keep you on a different type of blood thinner called Plavix for a couple of months. And then thereafter, we recommend an aspirin, which with a Watchman can help prevent stroke, but not without one. So that's sort of the paradigm of how the procedure works and sort of the time course of getting off of blood thinners afterwards. It's a procedure that takes about an hour. Most people spend overnight in the hospital and go home the next morning. I'm getting to the point with some of my ablation procedures now where people are going home the same day, and I could probably see that happening with the Watchman device pretty soon as well, because most patients do quite well, and overnight stay might not even be necessary for a lot of people. It is done under anesthesia, so you're asleep for the procedure, so you don't feel anything for that hour. But that's really what I wanted to focus on, was to talk a little bit about atrial fibrillation, what some of the consequences are in terms of the symptoms that people get, what some of the health consequences are if you don't control it, including going into heart failure, having a stroke, and some of the ways we have to tackle that, both with medications, with catheter ablation to get the heart back into rhythm, and with Watchman to help prevent stroke, all in minimally invasive ways. I'd be happy to stop there and let Dr. Serry give his presentation, and then we could probably both take some questions at the end if you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, if people have questions now, maybe why don't we have people that's fresh in their minds, and then you could address their questions, and then I could move on from there.
Sure, whatever's good for you, Roger.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to take any questions that people have. Yes.
Yeah, hi, my name is Roy Henderson. I've got one question.
Yeah.
On the Watchman, I'm a design engineer and I have a lot of experience with medical devices. So do you have any problems with this Watchman changing position or the metal parts of it breaking with metal fatigue over time? I know there was this device called vena cava filter that got a really bad reputation with breaking in the vena cava vein. Any problems with the Watchman similar to that?
Yeah, very good question. The answer is no. I am familiar with the vena cava filter you're talking about. And some people get confused about that with Watchman, but obviously it's a different device with a different design. But in the vena cava, you have constant blood flow through that filter. In the Watchman, you don't, because once it endothelializes and it walls itself off, it's pretty much essentially gone, to be honest with you. So I've never heard of a fracture or anything like that. There are rare cases of dislodgement where it moves out of position. That's really super rare. And it really happens at the time of surgery. Like, it's not something like with the vena cava filter that happens 5 years later. It's usually sort of an acute event because it never got seated right to begin with. And that's super rare. I've personally never seen that happen in the 4 or 5 years I've been doing them. But yeah, we haven't seen any issues like that, like they did see with those old IVC filters. And even though it's been FDA approved since 2015, so about 6 years, it was CE marked in Europe, 5 or 6 years before that. So there's really 11, 12 years of data, and I've never heard of that being a problem.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, good question.
Christine, unmute Christine. Nope, you're still muted, Christine.
Sorry, I didn't see that. Dr. Sawhney, can you spend a minute talking about AFib and its relationship to dementia?
Yeah, I mean, the best I can say is that there's been many studies that have correlated AFib with dementia, and the mechanisms are probably multifactorial. So there's definitely a small component of when people's blood isn't circulating as well, it's not getting up to their brain. They just don't think as clearly. And I've had a lot of patients over the years who have told me, you know what, I just can't focus when I'm in AFib. And once you get me back into rhythm, like, I think more clearly and I'm more with it. And that's for sure true. There's other components that are more complicated, but there are issues regarding bleeding in the brain. when people are on blood thinners, and particularly Coumadin, sometimes they get little microbleeds that are related to dementia. And then there's also, the stroke issue, which when you have multiple embolic events to the brain, multiple strokes, those knock off some brain cells that can lead to dementia too. So I think there's multiple reasons, but it's clearly associated with dementia. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Any other quick questions? All right. So let's go ahead with the next section. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Dr. Serry.
Yes, I am hitting share screen.
There you are.
And,
oh, look at him. He's all in scrubs.
Yeah, we have a procedure going next door. Here we go. Do you see my PowerPoint?
Not quite.
Oh, I have it up on my iPad.
So now you have to hit share screen and click on that.
Oh, is that right?
So if you if you click the share screen on the Zoom, you should get a pop-up that will show you that, and you would click on that.
So I see share screen. I hit that, and then I hit screen, I guess.
Yes.
And then it says screen broadcast. Is that?
Sure. Yes.
Or start broadcast.
There we go.
Okay. Is that is this showing my PowerPoint?
It is now, yes.
It is. Okay. That's amazing. I feel like I've accomplished everything I wanted to today.
Okay. And he's a heart surgeon. That makes me feel better.
So the advantage that I can get through things quicker is Dr. Sawhney works in 3 dimensions on the heart, and my work is all done in 2 dimensions. So this will be a lot easier to understand, and I can get through this quickly. So I'd like to thank Dr. Moyer for allowing me to speak. I've been at Palomar since 2007 in the specialty of interventional cardiology, which is constantly evolving. We are figuring out minimally invasive ways of fixing arteries and valves. And when I first arrived, it was setting up programs in carotid stenting, fixing neck arteries, and also aortic aneurysms without making an incision. The most recent project is called TAVR, T-A-V-R, which is fixing the aortic valve using X-ray and going through the femoral artery as opposed to the open surgery. So I'd like to just focus on this one procedure because it is really the biggest revolutionary procedure in my specialty in the past 20, 30 years. Let's see, so aortic stenosis, to familiarize with what the problem is that the heart has 4 valves. The final doorway or flap that blood has to get through to get to the body is the aortic valve. That valve can get narrow, it can get buildup of calcium over years. It's a very gradual process, and it's not well understood why, but in some people, it gets to where the valves just don't open well, and that would deprive you from blood getting to your brain and your body and everything. And in that regard, it is a life-threatening condition. It's something that occurs over time, and because of that, by the time someone gets such a narrow valve that they need a procedure, they are usually in the age range of 75, 80 to 100. So this procedure, TAVR, is more often for people in the 75 to 100-year-old age bracket. The reason I mention that is that a lot of times people in their mid 80s or 90s, they'll say like, well, what about my age? And actually this procedure is specifically for that age group. The way people feel the manifestation of a narrow valve is mostly shortness of breath or profound fatigue with exertion. Sometimes we see dizziness and chest discomfort and other things, but the main thing is progressive shortness of breath. The issue there is that once people, and this TAVR procedure has been done since 2002, but they've been fixing aortic valves with open surgery since the 1950s. So they have a lot of reflection on the timing of when a valve should be fixed and what the meaning is of the symptoms. And basically what they've seen is that once you have symptoms of your severely narrow valve, that is a point where the prognosis is bad. That is the point where in the following 1 to 2 years, there's a 60% chance that that valve will be a threat to your life. So here's a slide that shows the survival rate of aortic stenosis, for example, versus different cancers. So it's a very serious issue compared to other conditions of different heart valves, and that's why it's gained so much attention. Additionally, there are quite commonly circumstances where someone will have very narrow aortic stenosis, but not have any symptoms at all. So it is still something that we take very seriously, even without symptoms, because the first symptoms that some people have is a life-threatening situation, like walking to go get the mail and just passing out, and that's it. So the treatment options are the open surgery, like we mentioned, and the TAVR procedure, which is the less invasive that doesn't require open surgery. With open surgery, that involves being hooked to a heart-lung machine, a much higher risk of stroke and infection, much longer recovery of weeks to months, even a year from open heart surgery. With the TAVR procedure, it's catheter-based. We put tubes in the femoral arteries, that's at the arteries at the level of the hip. We deliver the valve under X-ray, and the valve is placed inside of a patient's degenerated valve. So we can't take their valve out, but we actually use their valve as a fixture to hold our valve in place. So we actually need that person's very rigid valve to hold the new valve in place. But in this procedure, there's no heart-lung machine. There's no need for general anesthesia. There's no surgical incision. We basically make punctures with needles, and we are able to deliver things through a hole that's about the size of an eraser, of a pencil eraser. And that ends up just healing up fine, even without stitches. TAVR at first had to earn its stripes, because here we had this tried and true way of doing the procedure for decades. First, they only allowed TAVR to be performed on people who were inoperable, who were poor surgical candidates. And the clinical trials have just skyrocketed in terms of showing that the TAVR procedure is a safer way to go and has better outcomes. The first procedure was done in 2002. This shows a timeline of different years where they had different landmarks of showing, like, okay, first we're going to look at people that you wouldn't even think of operating on them. And then they were all blown away, like, wow, these people are actually doing pretty well and they're actually surviving. So then they allowed the procedure, this TAVR procedure, to be done on patients that were at high risk for open surgery, not inoperable, but high risk. And again, they did well. Then intermediate risk. And finally, since 2018, TAVR is now shown, and this is in legitimate clinical trials, the TAVR is shown to have better outcomes in just any types of patients. It doesn't mean that it's always the procedure of choice. There are technicalities and other things that we take into consideration, but it is shown to have better rates of less complications, less stroke, and less serious complications than the open procedure, even in the healthiest of patients. So this is now exploding in terms of availability worldwide, nationwide, to where first it was done at a few centers. Here in San Diego, it was first done at Scripps Hospital, then it was done at Sharp, then UCSD, and Palomar was after UCSD. There are multiple other hospitals that have followed suit after us. Here on this slide, you can see on the left-hand side is the actual scaffolding, this circular stent or scaffolding that holds the valve leaflets that are inside in place. Those valve leaflets are made of the pericardial tissue of a cow's heart. So for example, it's not an actual cow's valve, but the heart is surrounded by a very thin layer that's about as thin as saran wrap. And they remove that layer off of a cow's heart and they sew that into the shapes of leaflets of a valve. And those leaflets are held inside of this scaffolding.
So for example, when John Wayne needed a new heart valve, in those days, they would actually take the valve out. They took the valve out of a pig and they put that, then John Wayne had a pig's valve in him. Now it's just the tissue of an animal's valve. And in this case, it's a cow's valve. In the middle there, you can see the delivery catheter that goes through the tube. And on the far right, you can see the tube that's placed in the femoral artery. We call that the sheath. We are now on the 3rd generation of this valve. So the procedures that we were doing just maybe 4 or 5 years ago, we're seeing a better outcomes even because of improved design of the valve. So another aspect there is when people ask, well, how long is this valve going to last? And things like that. Well, we actually don't know because we're on the 3rd generation of this design. And so it hasn't been around long enough for us to know. We just know intuitively that it probably does just as well as the surgical bioprosthetic valves. This is an animation, but from me, just hearing the Rotary meeting and everything, I can tell that you people are real, so you don't want an animation. So I'll move on here. Here is in the middle there, you can see on X-ray what it looks like. So when we're in the room doing the procedure, you can see that rectangular darkness in the middle. That's the valve before it's expanded. And that valve is sitting right inside the patient's valve. This is what it looks like just when we're doing the procedure. You can see just a little bit to the left and below the circular, darker, rectangular thing, which is the valve. You can see a little cord type thing, a dark line. That's a temporary pacemaker, because what we do is we temporarily pace the heart at like 180 beats per minute so that there will be no force of blood while we're deploying the valve. So we just do that for seconds so that the heart will be still. Then we deploy the valve, then we stop the pacing and remove the temporary pacer. So here is this slide again reiterates about that. Now that we are doing the procedure on healthier people, we're actually seeing that the procedure's complication rate is even less, because when they were first looking at the procedure's complication rate, we only had the sicker patients to reflect on. Now that the procedure is done on just all types of people, we're seeing that it's an even less rate of complication procedure. And this speaks to that as well in terms of mortality and stroke. Length of stay is quite less with TAVR. This slide is a little bit outdated, and this varies from one hospital to another. But what I can tell you is at Palomar, we usually have people go home the next day after the TAVR procedure. We've sent a few patients home the same day. One of the biggest things that we look for is when we expand that valve inside of the patient's valve and in their heart, sometimes we disrupt some of Dr. Sawhney's electrical fibers, and we disrupt the electrical conduction of the heart. So a small percentage of patients that receive a TAVR valve do wind up needing a pacemaker. So we watch for that post-procedure, and that's really one of the main things that we look for. Otherwise, the rates of things like stroke or bleeding or things like that are very low. So we did our first procedure in March of 2017. You can see by these numbers from year to year, we were going up because of the pandemic. 2020, we were on target actually to have probably like around 90 some cases done, but things slowed down with the pandemic. So, you know, we had less numbers there, but you can see that we're growing. To give everyone context on where Palomar is, we do more than UCSD Medical Center. And because each procedure is done by a team, and these different hospitals like UCSD or Sharp or Scripps have multiple teams that perform the procedure, we do as much or more than any other team in San Diego County. So for example, at Scripps, you have Kaiser. Kaiser has 3 different doctors that perform it. Scripps has 2 different things like that. So we do a good number of these, and we have good outcomes. And I'm proud to say that recently, the American College of Cardiology did a very thorough review of our program. They basically are allowed access to all of our data on all of our procedures ever performed in a very carefully conducted registry. And in a year-long, it was about a 6 to 12 month review that they did of our program. They accredited our program for TAVR, and that's just all these quality metrics. And we are the first hospital in the county and the only one currently to have that certification. So that's my two-dimensional blazing through this procedure for you.
Thank you for blazing through it. We did go over 5 minutes, but it was absolutely worth it. Absolutely worth it. Do we have any quick questions for our wonderful guest speaker?
I do.
Jay, go ahead. Jay's a doctor too.
Dr. Serry, when you're going through a calcified aortic valve, and it's almost closed, how do you manage to open it up to put in your artificial one?
Thank you. It's amazing how slick the design of this delivery catheter. That's when we had our first generation devices, we would first balloon the valve. And when we balloon the valve, we'd then have a nice aperture there that could fit our valve that we would deliver. One of the issues with that is that when you balloon the valve, you then have wide open aortic regurgitation. So that could cause deleterious things to the patient, while you're getting the actual valve in. So you'd first put a balloon and then take the balloon out and then put a valve. This third generation of design, we rarely have to do what's called pre-dilate. It's just so slick. So only on an extremely tight valve will we pre-dilate, as you suggest, but it's very rarely required.
All right. Do we have any other questions?
Yeah. Hi again. This is Roy Henderson again. I've got one question. Are the other valves in the heart, is this method being used to replace the other valves in the heart as well?
Excellent question. Yes. So this method is being used. One of the issues of the other valves in the heart is that those other valves are very rarely life-threatening when they have problems. And so when you do the whole risk benefit of doing a procedure, it's the idea that this is the valve that can get you. And so it's the one where the risk benefit is towards doing the procedure. Whereas the other ones, you really, under more extreme circumstances, would undertake such a procedure.
Okay.
Excellent. All right, let me real quick go back here. Do we have any other questions?
I'd just like to thank both of our presenters for a great presentation today, and very interesting and well done.
And thank you again very, very much. It was fascinating for sure. And I wish I had actually left a little more time for you guys.
No, thank you. Thanks to Dr. Moyer, has been a hero since I've arrived here. So thank you.
He's a hero to a lot of us.
Yeah, he is.
Not the hero we deserve, but I really want to, before I close out, I do want to say a quick hello to Bernie. Thank you for joining us today. I am so glad to see your face. And love you much.
Thank you very much. I also had the TAVR a couple of years, or a year and a half ago.
Did you? Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to override you there.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes, I had it at Scripps with Dr. Tierston, and it was very successful.
Very good. Another endorsement. All right, so I'm going to officially close the meeting here just because we have run over 10 minutes, but hey, that's the first one this year for me. Woohoo! Our shower thought for the day is English can be weird. It can be understood through tough, thorough thought, though. Anyhow, have a great day. Whoops. Yes. All right. We're just going to call it that. And that's the ring of the bell. You guys have an amazing week. I will leave this open for a short while and hope you all have a good week.
Thank you.